Yeah, I think one thing that's been really freeing for me is seeing my work as worship. Even if I don't make millions of dollars, like even if I helped one person come to know Jesus, like that has to be enough. Like that's a success.
Welcome to the Answer the Call podcast, everybody, where we help Christian professionals discern what they feel called to do and land a job or start a business that's aligned with it. My new friend, Norah Witten, is a business owner herself. And as we were getting to know each other a little while back, Norah, you shared some amazingly inspiring things with me about how you, I would say like disciple your employees and in a secular or quote non-Christian environment. It's just an everyday business, a physical therapy practice.
Mm-hmm.
You are a real force for good. And so I was like, Norah, will you please come on my podcast and say more? So thanks for coming in. I'm excited that you're here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Can you start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself and more about the business that you run and where you live, things like that?
Yeah. So I'm a physical therapist. I have been a physical therapist since 2016. That's when I graduated. So I guess that's like 9 years almost.
Nice. You and I graduated at the same time.
Yeah. So that's crazy. So I've been practicing for a while, and I started my business about 4 years ago in the fall of 2020. And it's so funny. This is where I am because I never wanted to own a business, but it's the perfect job for me. Like the Lord just knew. And I mostly didn't want to run a business because I just felt like it would be a lot of work and really stressful, which is 100% accurate.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I love it. Like, I love it. I'll take the bad with the good. So I started in the fall of 2020. So at that point, I guess I'd been practicing for about 4.5 years. And I just always knew that I didn't want to only do patient care. I really love it. And I love working with patients, but it's just really draining for me. And I like spreadsheets and admin work and some of the tech stuff. And so I just knew that I wanted to have something else along with patient care, and had started to be a little unhappy at the job I was at. So I remember just praying for so long for the Lord to provide me with another job. And I didn't know what that was going to be, but I remember thanking him for it before I even had it, of like, you're going to provide something and it's going to be great.
That's awesome.
I got that from a mentor and friend of mine, and she has a book called Wait, and she talks about that in the book. Her name's Rebecca Stevenson, so you should look her up. And just like, waiting on the Lord, and just like she talked about how sometimes after we get the thing we've been praying for, we sort of forget to thank God for it. And so she talked about thanking him ahead of time. And so that was something that really changed a lot of my prayer life too. But fast forward, prayed a lot about it. I ended up leaving my job. I was pregnant in the spring of 2020, so knew I just wasn't going to go back to where I was. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but it just worked out to start my own business. It was really low risk. Luckily for PT, you don't need a lot of things. And I had a gym to sublease space from. So ended up doing that. I had a couple other part-time jobs on the side too. And the business just took off, and I was like, wow, like I love this. I love learning about sales and marketing and KPIs.
You are a business lady.
Yes. So it just worked out. So that's how I ended up where I am.
That's incredible. Yeah. And wow, it's been, I guess 4 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
That's wow. And I know that you have like continual plans to just keep the growth going. And I think it's just so incredible hearing that you earlier in life had no aspirations to run a business. And then here you are, and there are some like really exciting elements to it that balance out the stressful parts.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Definitely.
So with your practice, how many employees do you have now?
So right now I have 2, and I have another one starting on Tuesday.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that was a lot of stuff behind the scenes, so I'm really excited to hear that they're finally starting. And Yeah, I pray that blesses your practice.
Yeah.
So things are going and growing. You have soon to be 3 teammates. How has that been being an employer, and how did you this kind of goes into, if I could squish 2 questions together. I know you told me that you have even though it isn't a quote Christian physical
Hmm.
therapy practice,
Hmm.
you lead it with Christian values.
Hmm.
So, can you share what are those values and how has it been bringing teammates into that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first important thing to share is I don't feel like it's always been this way. So when I first started hiring, um, I think I was doing it for the wrong reasons. So I got really caught up in, I was in a business coaching group and it was great. And I credit so much of my early success to being in this coaching group. But there's just a lot of emphasis on hiring and growing so you can have passive income,
Oh,
like
yeah,
you
I
can go
hate
on
that.
vacation and
Oh my
make
gosh.
money. And so I think when I started hiring, I was like, oh, yeah, well, I just want to, get out of patient care as much and I'm going to make more money. And so it was really more hiring for myself rather
Mhm.
than to just like create these really good jobs. And I had never been in a leadership position as far as like a work environment. In college, I had some leadership positions in groups that I was in, but I just never managed people before. And so I just didn't know what I was doing. So it things kind of came, I don't want to say totally crashing down at one point, but things did get very, very hard and really made me reevaluate, like, why am I even hiring employees? Do I
Mhm.
want to just, you know, be by myself, maybe, have an admin, but just treat patients. And so it took a lot of prayer and reflection and therapy to be like, okay, I actually do want to hire people, but now it's not out of a sense of what I'm going to get out of it.
Oh my
It's more of like,
gosh.
what am I going to, how am I going to help these employees to also help more patients?
Sorry, my crazy reaction is me fighting against the urge to hijack this entire podcast, turn it into a 2-hour conversation, and relate on how we have lived the exact same story
Oh my
arc.
gosh, that's
Because,
wild.
because it's so, and I'm sure listeners have, maybe longtime listeners have heard me kind of hint in a few podcasts that I really don't like the emphasis on life, do a lifestyle business, passive income, hands off. Uh, Basically, it's the illusion
Mm-hmm.
of time and money freedom being. Uh, I don't think that time and money freedom is a total illusion, but the way to get there can be in the way it's
Mm-hmm.
presented. And also, there could be some real junk values that are propping up that desire. And like you were saying, um, hiring for just how others can support you and your lifestyle and get you on a beach with a little martini as soon as possible, rather than, do I need this? How can I assume this responsibility with a heart that's prepared to serve them back?
Mm-hmm.
And to realize, like, wow, these employees don't exist to just create my dream life. But I think that hiring people is one of the biggest ways to change the world, honestly. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it changes lives to create a job and to create a good job environment for them. And so when I was not in that headspace, um, and rather in the selfish hiring mode years earlier in my business, I I deserted instead of delegated.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Thanks for being here. Can you just like own all this stuff and like not ask me that many questions?" And I'm not, you might not resonate with my like very
Yeah, no, I
my
totally
point of
get it.
view, but that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so it didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be a surprise.
Right.
And so that kind of, I would use similar words, did fall come crashing down at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to the point of exactly what you said, of maybe I'm just not, well, I'll put my own words to it. Maybe I'm just a solo, like I'm a lone wolf. Maybe I'm not meant to hire people.
Uh-huh.
I think I just kind of like keeping my business small and manageable. And then it went back into lifestyle business mode.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do I create a business that is just my dream?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you do the same thing to your customers as to your prior employers
Mm-hmm.
employees.
Yeah.
And I think I just had this huge wake up moment of no, no, no. I'm here to serve on every single level for every single
Mm-hmm.
person that is involved in this business
Mm-hmm.
that touches any part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is when everything started going much, much better. Natural growth happened. I was able to hire people, the right people for the right positions, and they stayed and they flourished. And we
Mm-hmm.
all are loving the environment as a team.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for coming to
Yeah.
my micro TED Talk.
Of course.
Thank you for allowing me to ranty rant on this subject. I am elated that we relate on
Yeah,
this.
yeah. I know it's just so easy to fall into, and I still really have to check myself a lot of the time, I think. And, I think I've always described myself kind of as a selfish person. I think most people are, right? We just
Mm,
sort of think about ourselves. And so I think business
yeah.
is definitely a way that the Lord has revealed a lot of those things to me. And I just have to continually work on, because I think it's hard too, especially when you have employees who are amazing,
Mm,
to just kind of let them do their thing. And, of course, we want to give them autonomy and some freedom and not micromanage, but like not forget to support them too, even when they're
yes.
doing well. And so it's like, I just feel like it's this illusion. It's like you just hire someone good and then you like, maybe meet with them here and there, but you don't have to worry about them. And I'm like, no, that's not the case.
A players deserve to be developed,
Yeah.
not turned into micro business owners without any of the upside.
Yes.
That's another thing that like really convicted me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I was taking advantage of like how awesome Audrey is, and I was just like, "Girl, thanks! Like you're doing amazing. It seems like you need nothing." And then I like really was like, "Wait, have I abandoned you?" And in the nicest way, she was like, kind of. And now, yeah, it feels like we have a real team environment and more of those Christian values
Yeah.
being lived out on more levels than previously
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So, with that, going back to values, once you had that wake up moment, what were the values you started leading your company with?
Yeah, so I guess so like our values of our company wouldn't necessarily be described as like overtly Christian,
Mm,
I guess, but I think more for me is just that service and sometimes taking the extra time to thank someone for something that they did, or just, words of affirmation aren't necessarily like my love language.
mm,
So I kind of forget that might be other people's. And so just telling them like, thank you, and yeah, just making sure I'm really serving and even supporting my team sometimes when it may not be convenient for me. So sometimes I've stayed later to co-treat with one of my therapists just to help. And, I don't necessarily want to be there till 5, but I'm like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to stay and help. And so, I think just serving in that way of my staff and of course the patient. So I think it's just those things that I have to continually work at, of being in this heart of service.
mhm.
And I hope that by
Yeah.
me doing that, it sets a good example.
I'm sure it's a better start than where we were at before.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's
So,
true.
um, with some of the stories that you shared about actually helping your employees on more of a personal level and that leading to kind of an encouragement in faith, an
Hmm.
opportunity to encourage them in the way of
Hmm.
faith. Whatever you're open to sharing, can you say a little bit more about that situation and how you decided to say, okay, in this heart of service, I'm not just a business robot, you're a person. I want to help you.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it just kind of, yeah, just always reminding myself of that, of seeing everyone how the Lord sees them. And I was doing a Bible study with my admin for a while, and I can't even remember how we started talking about faith or what we believe. I mean, it's been so long ago now, so I don't quite remember, but I remember just one day I asked her, I was like, "Hey, do you want to do a Bible study with me?" And she was like, "Yeah, that would be great."
It's amazing how many people will actually take you up on that if you just start asking.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
started a few years ago. It's pretty cool.
Right. And so we were doing that weekly for maybe a couple months or so, I would say. And so that was great. And we've still had some conversations since then. And I think that's something also in the back of my head that I've always thought of, like, even if I don't make millions of dollars, like, even if I helped one person come to know Jesus, like, that has to be enough. Like, that's a success.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of tried to always keep that in the back of my mind. And then sometimes too, during team meetings, I've shared some of the Word Before Work podcasts. So if it goes along, like we'll talk about our company values. And so, like, for instance, one of them is teamwork and also direct but respectful communication. And so one of the series that was on conflict and managing conflict in the workplace, I felt like that was a really good one because I think that's something we don't often think about. And I was like, especially as our team grows, we're not always going to agree on everything, and that's okay. But how do we handle that conflict? And so I'll try to pull those in if it lines up with what we're talking about.
Do you ever feel awkward about bringing up a Christian resource in your team meetings? Because your colleagues generally are not of faith, right?
Yeah, so I've had some differences. So I've had people who are and people who aren't, but I guess I also am lucky to be in the position where I'm like, I'm the boss, so I get to talk about whatever I want to talk about. And, of course, like, I'm not forcing anyone to think a certain way, but if they don't want to listen to that, then they don't have to be there, but nobody's going to fire me. So yeah, I would say not really. I've never felt like too awkward. Yeah. And hopefully I keep feeling that way.
Yeah, I hope so too. You're a special kind of person, let me say. And I'm sure some people will be like, all right, harsh. But I do appreciate um, your attitude towards this because some friends in my church small group that I go to every week, we talk about this topic
Mhm.
fairly often. And one of my friends was just saying, honestly, he's a super funny dude. He just is a straight shooter and you just accept whatever comes out of his mouth. He's like, honestly, I'm embarrassed to be Christian. I'm embarrassed of the church. I feel so weird about bringing it up. And I'm like, bro, why are you here? I, I mean, because I know that you believe and you like it
Mhm.
and you actually are like in your heart of hearts you're like I stand with Jesus,
Yeah.
but like you still hold these opinions and say them like every week. So we kind of antagonize each other constantly,
Yeah.
but and have a very good friendship. But um, yeah, I think I he was speaking to something that other people would say a lot more subtly and gently of like, yeah, I'm scared to be associated with a lot of bad press that people perceive about
Mhm.
Christians.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I feel like the most loving thing I could do is to hide my
Mhm.
faith and to just maybe one day, years down the line, after we're like besties and they find out I'm a Christian, they'll be like, oh, wow,
Mhm.
like you're a cooler Christian than I thought. But my problem with that is I find that in order to really become friends for years on end and be a yes man
Mhm.
to affirming various things and like to just be like, oh, yeah, no problem about a
Mhm.
lot of things that are going on in their life, perhaps that on a biblical level you don't stand with, uh, they probably aren't impressed that you're a Christian at the end of all that. They're like, oh, you're just
Right.
the same as me and you actually believe
Right.
don't believe. all of that.
Yeah.
So I just would much rather say up front without embarrassment, like just take the don't lie approach.
Hmm.
Like that's honestly how
Yeah.
I share about my faith. I just don't lie. I'll, if it's like natural to me, I'll say like, oh, praise the Lord. Or I'll just, I'm sure people sometimes just think I'm joking. And, but I do think hopefully it comes off as sincere. I'm like, to a mechanic, you are doing the Lord's work. Literally, God bless you for helping
Listen,
me.
I wish I was that bold, but yeah, no, I definitely I agree. I think it's yeah, I think it's hard a lot of times. And I mean, I can't say that like every situation I've been really bold in my faith and just shared. There's definitely been times where I probably could have spoken up, but I think I try to think about like, okay, what's the worst that's going to happen is like somebody just thinks I'm weird. And I mean, I even had a situation last week. I was at a live event for a business group that I've been in. And I posted on our Slack channel, like, hey, my husband and I, because he came with me to it, like, we're going to do a Bible study Thursday morning before the event starts. I'd love for anyone to join. And one girl came, actually the one who's in Austin, who I
Oh, nice.
I told you about. So she came, so that was great. And a couple other people, even a couple of people like who are sort of in charge of them, were like, oh, that's so great that like you're doing that. But I felt really discouraged that like nobody else came. And then we tried to do it again at lunch the next day and like still nobody came. And so I was like, okay, well, I feel silly, but I'm like, I guess that's the worst that's going to happen. Like, I'm not going to be kicked out or persecuted or anything
Yeah,
for doing this, you know?
exactly.
So I think just trying to keep that in mind. And like, even I had an old coworker at my old job, and I actually had shared about Jesus and the gospel with her a handful of times. And one time I remember she asked me, she was like, do you think I'm going to hell? And I was like, well, if you don't believe in Jesus, like, yes. And I'm like, I hate saying that to you, but I was like, the good news is that you don't have to have that as your fate, But I think it's like that's like the most loving thing I could say, right?
Yes.
And rather than
Don't lie.
lying and be like, well, I mean, you could be a good person. So I think it's just keeping in mind like how saying those hard things is actually more loving, even if it causes some conflict.
Exactly.
And I mean, I said that to her and she's still my friend. So it
Hey,
was like, it
yeah,
didn't drive her away.
exactly. I
Um,
respect people who speak the truth. Like,
yeah.
just be in integrity. And I, it is totally fine to, I believe in free speech. I believe in freedom of choice. Speak what you believe to be true and actually live it out. And I
Hmm.
will respect that in you just as much as I hope you respect that in me. But I also don't feel entitled to it
Yeah.
because, you know, Jesus, if Jesus was treated to the extent that he was, going and suffering on the cross, I could suffer some awkwardness and I don't feel entitled to people loving me for
Right.
sharing the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Well, Nora, you're a legend in my
Oh my
eyes.
gosh. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Is there any like final encouragement that you would want the listener to leave with, whether they're a business leader in their own business or um, in a regular
Yeah.
traditional job?
Yeah.
What you would you want them to hear?
Yeah, I think one thing that's been really freeing for me is seeing my work as worship
Mm,
and so of course reading the sacredness of secular work that was so eye-opening for me. But I think a lot of times at church and or small groups, like the topic of worship comes up, and sometimes it can be really easy to feel guilty maybe about how little you're praying during the day, or how much time you're praying compared to the time you're spending at work. And of course we should be spending time like reading and praying and having that intentional time. But in one of Jordan's podcasts, I think the one that had Shane, he was the astronaut on there. I can't remember if it was either him or Jordan, basically said the line like, worship is anything that delights the Lord. And so seeing how when I'm working with a patient and I'm giving them my full attention and best effort, like that's a form of worship, even though I may not be specifically thinking about Jesus or praying like throughout
yes.
the whole session. But if I was, that would be doing that patient a disservice because I'm not giving them my full attention. So I think that can be really freeing, and seeing it, like anything you do, doing it, with all your attention and all your heart and working for the Lord, like that's still worshiping, even if you're not specifically praying in that moment.
Yes. Amen. Colossians 3:23.
Yes.
And by the way, for listeners, our mutual mentor is Jordan Rayner, and he has the Mere
Yes.
Christians podcast, and he wrote the absolute banger, the sacredness of secular work, that I insist everyone read immediately. So that's what you were referring to,
Yes.
but I love that. Yeah, I could go off. That's another one that I'm like gonna have to fight to not have a 2-hour tangent on, of just like you are worshiping God by participating in, through any means, in
Mm-hmm.
the redemption of all things,
Mm-hmm.
which is to help redeem someone's body from decay and pain,
Mm-hmm.
to help redeem their job search, or their, if you're a dentist, their teeth. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
are worshiping the Lord
Yeah.
by making it, as much as it's up to us with our little hands and feet. It's just like, save people from decay by pointing them to true hope, likely through a doorway of showing them temporary hope.
Mm-hmm.
And, blessed be the name of the
Yeah.
Lord. That's all my
Yes.
scattered thoughts for the day.
Love it.
Nora, thanks again. Where can people find you and your clinic, or follow along with you?
Yeah, so my clinic is in Durham, North Carolina, and you can just find our website, which is www.functionalphysiopt.com, or on Instagram, we're just at Functional Physio. Physio spelled with a Z, Phyzio. And you can connect with us there. I also have a new podcast. Well, it's not
Oh, no
exactly
way.
new. I started it like 2 years ago, and I didn't do that many episodes, but I'm starting it back up again. It's called the
Whee!
Functional Pelvic Health Podcast. So if you're an active woman who wants to exercise and do all the things without having pelvic floor issues, you can listen to that, and hopefully it'll help.
You have a new fan in me.
Thanks.
That's so cool. One of my neighbors is a pelvic floor specialist,
Oh,
and I
that's
had her
awesome.
over for dinner, and I was like, Mac, can I ask you so many inappropriate questions? And she's like, this is my passion in life.
Yeah, it's not weird. It's not weird if that's what you do for work.
It was a pretty cool conversation.
I'm
And she
sure.
agreed to hang out with me again after
Well,
that.
that's
So
good.
praise the Lord.
Yes.
Well, cheers. And yeah, thank you so much, Nora. I really appreciated our conversation.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To get an even more meaningful head start into your calling, head to thecalledcareer.com, where my fellow career coach Audrey and I have created a whole suite of free resources and tools to help you get clear and get a job today. For those who are definitely ready to land a job or start a business in the next 6 to 12 months, we're here to help you biblically and practically discern your calling through coaching, reflection, and deep market research. Identify the job that's aligned with it, even if you currently have no idea what you want. Rebrand your resume and LinkedIn to translate your background to appeal to your future boss. P.S. We take this off your plate and do this for you. Also, we'll teach you how to land referrals and get attention from leadership through networking. Again, if that makes you nervous, we have these emails and LinkedIn messages literally written for you, so you don't have to sweat. We're also here to give you unlimited interview practice, so you're prepared to address every elephant in the room and knock selling yourself out of the park. Then we'll round out with helping you negotiate your salary so you land thousands more. Just so you know, recent clients have gotten $8,000 to $50,000 salary increases, even though they were totally non-traditional candidates. That's because we specialize in helping non-traditional career pivoters land jobs they're ecstatic to serve in. It takes work, but we're here to see you through until the end, when we're celebrating that day that you send me an email in all caps and you say, Kelsey, I got the job. Then you could be on the podcast. But I'll be here until then, keeping you accountable and encouraged by meeting with you literally until you land the job you want, even if that's up to 6 months from now within our program. Apply to join at thecalledcareer.com, and I'll see you next week here at Answer the Call. Bye for now.